This is from the Greedy, Confused and Invisible by Myths and Legends chapter, and it's called It's Real But It's Wrong and Weird. And that's the kind of feeling you get when you come out as anything other than gay. But ever since I told my boss I was going to a bi event, she seems to treat me like some kind of fake. She says little comments all the time about how I can't stick at things, how I'm not a team player. One time she told me not to apply for a promotion because they wanted someone loyal who would commit. I think I'd have got that one too. I wish I'd never mentioned it now. And that is really the kind of snide comments you get because you're bisexual, that you're not going to be able to kind of commit to anything else. But anyway, I'll just read on a bit more. There's this idea that bisexual people are confused who they really fancy and they haven't decided on their sexuality, or are trying to have it both ways. Like bisexuality doesn't exist trope. There's a superficial appeal to this. People failing to choose a side or trying to be on two sides simultaneously is a traditional sign that they're unworthy and untrustworthy, and that they're trying to play both sides off against each other, and also that they're double agents or that they're disloyal. Part of the problem is the analogies are weirdly powerful. One popular description of bisexuality is batting for both teams. This immediately sets up some interesting assumptions. In any game with two teams, playing for both sides at once clearly is unsportsmanlike. You'd only ever play for one team, and even switching between games would be quite dodgy. Supporting a team is even more polarised. Players might move to different football teams, but a football supporter must never do that. In this context, it's easy to see why the idea of bisexuality looks like some kind of betrayal. Other analogies have a similar feel to them, trying to have your cake and eat it too. I mean, sorry, I have to take a side. What else are you supposed to do with cake? You just look at it. Oh, cake. Oh, no. Inhale it. That's how you do it. Okay. Sorry, back to the reading. However, just because you can't make a striking visual metaphor about something doesn't mean you've arrived at any kind of truth. Bisexuality is just a type of sexuality and nothing more. It doesn't imply anything else about you. It's not a choice, so any comparison involving a decision, like being a double agent, it won't work. A better analogy would be someone who has a dual nationality, or quite liking but not really loving Marmite. It's a phase. This is slightly different accusation because it allows for the idea that you may be genuinely bisexual now, but it won't last. Obviously this is aimed at younger people, so at least you're less likely to hear it when you get older. And there's a quote: "When I came out to them aged 19, my mum told me it was a phase and I'd grow out of it. Now I'm 42, she can't exactly say that anymore. It's clear that if I was going to grow out of it, I'd have done so by now." Of course bisexuality can be a phase, so can heterosexuality and homosexuality. Many bi people identify as straight or gay on the way to eventually settling with a bi identity. The fact that sexuality can change and that labels people want to use can change doesn't mean that anyone's current sexuality or label isn't valid. After all, isn't everything ultimately a phase? There's one that everyone's bi, really. This is something often said by bisexuals and non-bisexuals alike. Everyone's a bit bisexual. It feels right to a lot of people, and it's a positive thing to say, yeah? Well, not necessarily. For one thing, it's not true. Most people aren't bisexual and don't identify as such. And the rules about imposing your labels on other people apply here too. Don't label gay, lesbian or straight friends as bisexual if that's not something they call themselves. It also really doesn't help bi visibility. If everyone's bi, people argue, then why make a fuss about it? Everyone isn't bisexual, and that's okay. And then lastly, this myth of needing both genders or the unfaithful bisexual. I've lost count how many people, especially lesbians, have said they aren't bisexual because they've only slept with or had relations with one or two members of the other sex. Another quote, I was once told by a lesbian friend that I wasn't a proper bisexual because I slept with more men than I had with women. I then told her that she couldn't be a proper lesbian then because I'd slept with more women than she had. Not entirely fair, I know, but something stupid deserves an equally stupid answer. The idea that proper bisexuals are exactly 50-50 in their sexuality has been mentioned elsewhere in the book, but it's a silly idea and it's an extremely popular one too, because it helps people keep a sort of binary view. If you can't be on one side or the other, then you must be precisely in the middle. Like the world's best trapeze artist, permanently balancing on a wire, suspended over the net of monosexuality. You wobble slightly in one direction or another, and you lose your right to be bi. A lot of these myths are what I've included in my biphobia zine, and only slightly pushing it now, but it's something that you can all have a flick through. But the myths that we get exposed to, it's like really lazy thinking of, you know, if I pass this around the room to any bisexual people, they'll be saying, oh yeah, I've been told that as well, and that, and that, and that. So the odds of you actually receiving one of these sort of stereotype myths, awful things, is pretty high. So if that's the only reason to buy it, buy it, so you'll have an answer to it. But there is things like, where is it? Under E, I've got, it's A to Z of biphobia. Everyone's bi. Everyone's a bit bi, really. What's wrong with that? It's a compliment. And it's got one robot saying, assimilation is not acceptance. And there's another robot who's called 8 of 9, saying, tell that to the Borg, for all you Star Trek fans out there. So, yeah, it's really sad that these are just so prevalent. But, you know, I'm sure if I come out here and talk to the cab driver on the way home, then, you know, they'd have the same questions, the same myths and the same stereotypes. So, yeah, it's another reason why being a bisexual activist, you know, is really important, because we get to break those myths about what bisexual people are. I mean, there's still a very strong myth that only white people can be LGBT, or if I'm black and I'm anyway LGBT, then it means I'm copying white people, or I secretly want to be white people. Now, people said that about me when I was a kid and I was into rock music. You like status quo, you're trying to be white. Because I wasn't into R&B, well, it wasn't R&B in the 70s, I wasn't into soul or gospel. I was into, you know, I wasn't into reggae, I was into rock and roll. So, yeah, breaking those myths can be really important, and you can just break those myths by safely, and if it's safe for you, being out as bisexual. But of course, if it's not safe for you, if you're going to be putting yourself in danger, then don't do it. You know, look after yourself first. But that's part of the reason why I did these sort of beige coloured posters that are around the room. Are about the bisexuals of colour, and in this year's LGBT History Month, I produced these, and we got great funding from Unison, the union, who are fantastic, printed out these posters for us about the things that we face. So, you know, things like increased violence and being sexualised, because bisexuals, they're into sex, right? It's in the name, and we just want to do it with everybody. And so that sort of increases the risk of us getting sexually assaulted, of being groped, of being asked really intrusive questions when we go out. But there are other things like being isolated and being rejected from our family and from communities as well as things like racism too. So this set of 5 posters, if anyone drops me an email at the Buys of Colour email address, I can post off. We've got funding to post off these set of posters for organisations or charities. So, or, you know, if this place wants some, then you can definitely do it. But it really is breaking down a lot of barriers of like who can be queer, who can be bisexual, because there's a real variety of faces there, different ethnicities, and that's something that's really important. because things like respectability and shame are unfortunately big factors in a lot of Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. What will people think of us? We mustn't bring shame on the family, and we must all be respectable and, you know, have 2.4 kids and be whatever, when, you know, these are our lives. And so I was really happy to take the photos and do the writing and produce these posters. So I encourage you all to have a look at that afterwards, and to look at all the resources too. I won't push my zine anymore. If you just want to read it and put it down, that's fine. But yeah, that's me done talking for now.